Joining me now is Hugh Dugan, an international relations expert and visiting scholar at Seton Hall University. Thanks so much for joining us. Wang said we're once again at a crossroads. It's time to make the right choice between peace and war, between unity and division. Then he outlined his view that a diplomatic solution is the only pathway. What did you make of the speech?
Well, of course, diplomacy should always be on the table, and it's never off the table. I was very impressed with the effective engagement of China, first of all, in the General Assembly and in the foreign minister's overall remarks. They were quite positive and upbeat, and they put the North Korean issue in some context because, in fact, he didn't address it until halfway through his speech. So I think the measured approach, we hope, of good, quiet diplomacy being exercised by China throughout this exercise will serve us all well. In fact, he did call upon different parties to meet each other halfway, but I think we see this week at the UN, thanks to China's interventions, that this isn't just a U.S.-North Korea issue whatsoever, and there has to be a larger United Nations concerted effort to address this tension. That's why I was so happy that the Security Council met this afternoon at the U.S. behest, but it was a group meeting to review nonproliferation and to remind each other of the principles and tenets that have to go into implementing the effective sanctions regimes against those that are proliferating.
Hugh, I'm sure you heard the earlier soundbite where he talked about the Korean Peninsula, the call for denuclearization that's more comprehensive, thorough, irreversible. And as Nathan alluded to, he talked about, hearkening back to what he saw as a real chance, the progress in the six-party talks and a plan in 2005 that could have ended in peace. Is there a chance that any of that can be revisited?
Well, the six-party talks outcome was a happy day at that time, and it sits on the table today. So any tool, any device that shows compromise and consensus at any time in history should be brought forward as a basis for further discussion. In that context, in about a month and a half, the United Nations is going to look at the Olympic truce resolution in advance of South Korea's hosting of the Winter Games in February, which is also going to have a very positive potential for bringing the two Koreas together, if just for that time frame. And the Olympic truce is very ancient. So I think we can look to something only 10 years old as a possible basis for continued discussion.
And is that the key, to kind of think outside the box, come up with different solutions?
Yes, of course, and I think that's what President Trump's speech did this week. Of course, it focused everybody's attention through the selection of a few words, but on the whole, he demonstrated that he's willing to talk. He stayed for 4 days in New York. Usually a president doesn't do that, and he's willing to talk to all parties involved. And in fact, today, the institution of new sanctions out of Washington on North Korea indicates that, yes, we are willing to explore and use all tools, anything available, short of military, to go forward.
We've heard from the U.S. president this week. We just heard from Kim Jong-un, who responded to his speech today. Of course, the foreign minister of China there at the lectern talking. Saturday, we'll hear from the foreign minister of the DPRK. What will you be listening for?
Well, it may be the second most listened to speech of this week, but obviously today we saw that North Korea had a raw nerve, and when dentists look for trouble and they find a raw nerve, the patient reacts, and that's where we know we have to pay our attention. So let's hope that the rhetoric this weekend is measured, balanced, that they've calmed down a bit, and that they recognize that this is a world intervention against North Korea, not a one-on-one with any one country or another, but that in fact they're having their turn on Saturday to come up with some explanation, not just to their behavior, but perhaps a justification for why they should remain in the chamber of peace-loving nations altogether.
Hugh, one final question. The U.S. president, of course, on the campaign trail talked a lot about his book, The Art of the Deal, but since he's become president, it seems like he's kind of a proponent of the art of abandoning the deal, saying he wants out of NAFTA, scrapping the Trans-Pacific Partnership, stepping away from the Paris Climate Agreement. He also says he wants out of this Iran deal. What would be the incentive for the DPRK to sit down and negotiate when it seems like this president has no problem walking away from deals?
Well, I don't think he walks away from deals. I think he wants us all to reevaluate some of the terms of those deals, many of which have gone stale over time or which need a bit of review because the world turns and the deal should be as relevant as possible. So in terms of everyone's call that the U.S. remain in the Iran deal, the Iranians are the ones that determine that. If they are not in compliance, then any of the members who are a part of that deal have to realize that they can't stay in a deal in which Iran is not compliant. So I believe the pressure is on Iran to show compliance. It's not on the U.S. as to whether or not it's going to walk away. But I think the term walk away is unfortunate as well, because the deal has provisions that would enable renegotiation of the terms, which I think is, again, what this president is looking to do. He's looking to bring the best terms available to any and all of these agreements into which the United States has entered.
Hugh Dugan joining us from New York. Thanks so much.